All right, it's on.
All right, cool. Let's get it started then.
So, what's the you wanted to have like a first topic?
Yeah, just something I kind of wanted to get out of the way was Trump's nominee for SCOTUS, which was Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, so,
I was just gonna say that this is the High Council, but unofficial episode.
oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
because we don't have all three members, so we're doing an impromptu little thing just to kind of test out our equipment. I got a Blue Yeti mic, and this is Jordan, by the way. Relative Arrow is my personal podcast, and our other host, Shawn, he already has a Blue Yeti, but uh, Trent does not yet.
no, I
And
don't. So I'm using my Apple earbuds.
yeah, and once we get that, we'll be really set. Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
so we were just gonna talk, like he said before, we're gonna talk. We're gonna have our first topic about Brett Kavanaugh, and then we're probably gonna talk about some other, probably lighter topics, some non-political, or just shoot the shit. So,
Yeah, yeah.
what you said you had some notes on Brett Kavanaugh, and I was just gonna say, how would you define him ideologically?
Ideologically, I'd say he's kind of hard to pin down as far as what you can find in mainstream media, what you can find on Wikipedia. But when you really kind of look at the things he says, like his statements, I think he's extremely far right.
So yeah, he's just a typical neoliberal. So you can't find anything in the mainstream media about him that's damning. But when you actually look at the data, he's just for all the wrong shit. Because
Right. Yeah. I mean, I haven't really seen anything on him economics wise or foreign policy wise. But what I have seen, he's a very big social conservative. Like, there were articles on the National Review that were praising his nomination. You
oh
know,
yeah,
as a win for striking down abortion rights, as a win for gun rights, and possibly for reversing the uh, gay marriage, which was made legal in 2016.
yeah. Uh,
Or when,
Oberfell v Hodges, I believe, and I think it was 2015 as well.
yeah, it was the previous year. You're right.
But which is crazy because it would be very, very disheartening if the United States only had same-sex marriage for 3 years and then it was immediately reversed. That would
Right.
just. I mean, there's been a wave of right-wing authoritarianism in many countries the past few years. So like
Oh yeah.
obviously Theresa May, and there's been other elections too. But the United States, I think, was the most striking because everyone saw Obama and they just thought he was going to be a continuation. But now that Trump's in, he's just going to be putting all of these conservative judges, much more conservative than typical neoliberal or conservative as well, like just far right
Oh yeah. Trump
people.
has made a point to state that he wants to appoint as many conservative justices as he can. So I can't really say it comes as a surprise. But as far as the potential options go, I think we kind of went farther
Yeah.
to the right.
And it's funny
Uh,
because he keeps putting people in his administration which are so obviously a part of the establishment, even though he pretended to be the anti-establishment candidate.
yeah, that's another thing about Kavanaugh is he served under George W. Bush's administration. He was,
Yeah.
yeah, he worked in that administration. And even before then, he was part of the Starr probe investigating Bill Clinton in the 90s,
Oh, nice. So,
which which was interesting because then in 2009 he reversed on the topic, and here I have a quote. He said in 2009 he wrote that indicting a sitting president would, quote, ill serve the public interest, especially in times of financial or national security crisis, end quote. And of course, in the United States, every time is a time of financial or national security crisis.
yeah, and he was obviously just saying that because he's a he's a hack who only cares about people he agrees with. So when Bush was president, of course, he's not going to say that presidents can be indicted. But when Clinton's president, oh yeah, presidents can be indicted.
Well, that
And
was in 2009, so
oh yeah,
yeah, it was 2009. So
well, Obama was pretty much a Republican president, so and so was Clinton, honestly. But
I
Clinton was
mean,
a
yeah,
little bit more left than Obama.
I just thought that was kind of a note, like a noteworthy flip flop there. He went from literally investigating a president to completely reversing and say that it would be detrimental to public interest.
Yeah, and I believe the court. I mean, it really is precedent that the president cannot be indicted. The president has to be impeached. Like, that's the only way he can be removed.
Right.
Which is pretty bad considering Congress right now.
Yeah. The Republicans still have a pretty slim majority, so I wouldn't expect Trump to be impeached anytime soon.
Well, and if you left it up to the Democrats, I guarantee you'd have like Tim Kaine and Doug Jones just saying, "Oh well, we need to keep him in office because freedom." Or, I mean, they're not going to be substantially left wing in any situation. I do think the Democrats would impeach him. I just think that. I honestly don't know though. Like, I think they might just not, even if they had the chance, because the Democrats also said they were going to get universal health care. Then they passed a Republican health care bill.
Right, but I mean, even if they did decide to impeach, he still got these. He nominated Gorsuch, who is confirmed. He's nominated Kavanaugh, who will likely be confirmed.
Yeah.
By the likes of certain.
And those can't be removed at all.
Right, and I say he'll likely be confirmed because I think that the Democrats will have some transient voters who cross the aisle and vote with the Republicans.
Yeah, coincidentally,
yeah.
There's always just enough Democrats to get the conservative shit passed. It's almost as if the same people own both the parties. But
yeah, the business party.
The two branches of the business party. Yeah, that is. Or what's that quote? The United States is also a one-party system, but in typical American extravagance, they have two of them.
Yeah. That's funny.
That's bad.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, Kavanaugh, he's definitely a Washington insider. He's just been in that bubble for so long, there's no way he isn't. But also that he said some things that just completely contradict themselves.
Yeah. So he's just the typical, like, malleable establishment figure that is just going to do the bidding of whatever person throws money at him.
I don't know about that, but I know he's a Roman Catholic. He's argued that, like...
So to some extent, he is principled. He just doesn't believe in, like, progressive values.
I guess not. I have to know where he was elected. He has always been appointed to something, which makes me think he's more of like a social conservative than an economic conservative, or the likes of that, where he's going to have to push for pro-business interests. I think he's just a socially conservative guy.
There's definitely some, like Antonin Scalia, for example. He was a principled conservative, so he was a libertarian to some extent, because he literally said that he supported the right to, like, burn the flag.
Right.
And he was like, well, that's obviously covered under the First Amendment. Which obviously all these other conservatives don't say that. Like, when it's something they don't like, instantly they're authoritarians, but if it's something they like, they just think, oh well, freedom of choice, so guns and Christianity.
I always give the benefit of the doubt and just assume that they're principled on the issue until proven otherwise.
Yeah. With any figure in the media, or just any well-known figure, especially in politics, you have to be scientific about it. You can't assume anything.
Right, yeah. But I would say that from what I've seen, the mainstream Republican position tends towards, like, being anti-abortion, being a gun anarchist, etc.
Yeah. And, there's also substantial proof that, we know who pays the Republicans, we know who pays the Democrats, so we know what issues they're going to champion. They're going to put on a big show about trivial issues, and then they're going to disagree on those, but then they're just going to vote with each other to expand the military, which, by the way, I think the last vote that they expanded the military with, it was like $100 billion more a year in the military budget. And
I think anywhere between 80 and 100 billion, something along those lines.
And that's the amount of money per year it would take to make public university free.
But of course, we can't do that. Too expensive.
Yeah, but the Democrats, I think Tim Kaine voted for that, like Hillary's VP.
Yeah, I'm sure there were a whole host of Democrats who sold themselves to the Republicans in that regard. Probably trying to buy.
They vote the same way on spying, like mass surveillance, and they vote the same way on pretty much any matter that... I mean, you can predict which way they're going to vote based on who pays for them.
Yeah.
At this point, so we know they're going to do the bidding of the military-industrial complex, and we know they're going to do the bidding of. I mean, the Republicans are bought by big oil, so the Democrats have free range to talk about climate change. But if they didn't, you just wouldn't hear the Democrats talk about climate change.
Right, but
And
even with that being the case, I don't think that it's ever like such a big issue. Like you never even I mean, it's obvious it's a big issue, but you never hear Democrats making a big stir about it.
yeah, so they're probably being paid off at least to some extent. Or I think more realistically, I think oil companies might just have a trust formed with media companies, or a trust formed with like Wall Street, for example. And I think because of that trust, all the big money kind of flows in the same direction. So the Democrats probably don't. I mean, they probably are allowed to talk about climate change, but they can't talk about it too much because otherwise they would hurt the friends of their donors, who is big oil.
Right, right.
But yeah, I saw on Twitter that Brett Kavanaugh he like supported the dissent for Roe v. Wade, so he obviously doesn't believe in abortion rights.
Yeah, that was another one of his contradictory statements because he was part of that dissent, but he also said in May of 2006 he would follow Roe v. Wade faithfully and fully. And so, I mean, it's just like the more I learn about this guy, the more I think that he's, just someone who's going to flip flop on the issues depending on who's talking to him.
Yeah, and that's
Or,
that's
he'll
pretty
say,
bad for the Supreme Court. Someone who's only, I think he's like 53.
yeah, someone who says one thing and does another.
And we're gonna have to deal with him for a long time, unless our system has a fundamental restructuring, which hopefully that occurs.
Well, yeah, of course, hopefully that occurs, but at the present time, I don't think that that's even in the cards.
Yeah,
Especially,
we're still arguing about getting health care.
Well, yeah, and especially for the Supreme Court at this time, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's 85. There was another one, Stephen Breyer, he's I think 80 or 81.
The
So
notorious RBG.
yeah, so there are some other Supreme Court justices that might be replaced soon if they
By
retire.
Trump.
I mean, that's the way it
so
works, man.
bad. Oh
The
man,
events, the
I
events
can't
just all
believe
have to line up at once.
Donald Trump, the reality TV star, nominating Supreme Court justices.
It's pretty unbelievable, but
No, Mike Pence nominating a Supreme Court justice. That would
yeah,
be. I don't even know what that would be, actually. Turns out
I
he
mean,
nominates Bernie Sanders as Supreme. No, he nominates AOC.
I don't know. I think if Mike Pence were the one nominating anybody, they probably wouldn't be a far cry from people like Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I mean, he would just nominate, like, Richard Spencer or some shit. I can't, wait, okay, never mind. That's
I don't even want to think
so.
about that.
That's literally the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I'm not.
I'm pretty sure Ben Shapiro tried to put his name in the ring for.
Yeah, he did. And he wore like a
Supreme
trash
Court.
bag on Twitter, and it looked like
Oh,
to make it look like a Supreme Court like gown. And I gotta say, it looked like he had something wrong with his brain or something in that picture.
I mean, that's just Shapiro at any given time.
But yeah, that's Twitter for you. Twitter has like, I saw. I mean, the shit that Trump tweets is so otherworldly. Like, you look at it and you just can't even believe that's reality. Like, it almost has to be like a deep fake. Like none of that's real. It's just a simulation completely. Because the stuff that he says is so crazy. Like, I mean, it's not that crazy because honestly, the stuff that he used to say was crazy, but now all he does is like fearfully like screech about the Mueller investigation.
Yeah, I mean, he's just the kind of person where you can't believe anything he says at face value. You've always got to dig deeper because it's either outright false or it's just so misleading to the point where it's essentially false.
Yeah. And, con men like Trump, they really flourish on Twitter because Twitter is basically just a direct democracy, right? And that's just what it is.
Right.
And it, to no surprise, the things that get the most likes and retweets on Twitter are the most like emotionally appealing, or the most like immediate satisfaction you get from looking at the tweet.
Well, I mean, well, of course, because that's all you can fit in so many characters. Less than
Yeah,
300 characters.
yeah. It's not a place for discourse really, unless you really want to get into it. But
Right.
even
I
then, most
mean,
people aren't willing to do that on something with a limited character count.
oh yeah. I mean, even in
I'm
general,
not,
people.
honestly.
I generally am not really into it just because I'm a busy fucking person.
I'll
But
talk to people if they respond to me, but otherwise, I don't really reply to other people's replies. Like, I'll comment if I don't see my opinion present, and
right.
because if I just see my opinion present, I'll just like that on Twitter.
Yeah.
But if I don't see my opinion present, and I think it's like, I feel particularly motivated, I might say something. Like I find, because I obviously, since I'm fairly left wing, I follow left wing people, and so I'll see, and the left. I mean, the left, especially these days, is in many ways just as susceptible to the right with intellectual dishonesty.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say it's just as susceptible because there's certain aspects to the right which are just based in ignorance inherently. So I think there's definitely more people that are intellectually dishonest on the right because they have to be in order to argue their views.
Well,
But
yeah, but you've also got to remember that there are certain elements on the left that are just
yeah,
created through mainstream media, just created through mainstream opinion,
yeah,
really, and those people don't actually believe anything. They just regurgitate CNN
yeah.
or MSNBC or what have you.
Well, it's because the act of saying you're for good things is enough to fool people. It's always been enough to fool people, but on Twitter you see it especially. I mean, people are just after clout, constantly
I
tweeting
mean,
about that.
yeah, and that's really kind of the damning aspect of Twitter is it's just such a limited platform as far as actual
Yeah,
conversation goes.
it wouldn't even be like there's the staff of Twitter just weirdly targets certain people. Like some days it seems like they have a left wing bias, and then some days they have like an obvious right wing bias. And I really just don't get that. Like, and which isn't a problem. I mean, I don't mind the people on Twitter having an opinion, but then they just act on it. Like, there was the people who tried to say the verification on Twitter was like an endorsement of the beliefs of Richard Spencer.
Oh yeah, that was just ridiculous.
Um, yeah, it is ridiculous, but then Twitter made it that way because Twitter made rules that enforced what people cried about, and because of that, which by the way, if you think people should be unverified because they're a bigot, um, all I have to say to you is, do you really want? I mean, wouldn't you rather have the real bigot be known?
Right.
That's my thing. Like, wouldn't you rather have like? Wouldn't you want to? Don't you want to honestly present that so that you know who's saying it? Because otherwise, what do you have? I mean, you're just going to drive those people into the deeper recesses of the internet where they're going to have an echo chamber, and all they're going to do is, I mean, and not to mention when you ban ideas, you give an edge to that idea. So you're attracting younger people to that idea by doing that.
Right. Well, I mean, I also think it's just a matter of, a court of public opinion type deal.
Yeah.
I
And
don't think there's. Hmm?
I was just gonna say I was referring mainly to censorship there, like because I'm not saying that like unverifying people isn't necessarily censorship. I just think it's stupid to make verification about that when it's not.
Well, yeah, because its original intention was to identify people who were big enough to be impersonated.
Yeah, and I think it's just pretty silly to see a check mark and then just have your primal brain scream out your mouth like, "Oh well, check mark equal endorsement." And
Yeah.
no, just if people could just think, you know, and that'd be great. That'd be great if people could just start thinking. By the way,
I
because
wouldn't count on that.
Twitter is just, in my opinion, Twitter is exactly, it's a representation of like how people really are, and
Right.
most people are fucking stupid. Like most people, well, like individually, people are very intelligent. Like have you, it's like that quote from Men in Black where he's like, people are smart, or no, he says a person is smart, people are stupid. Because the social aspect to people is so strong and it overwrites logic to such a degree where everything with the most likes on Twitter is just the most bare minimum. Like, it's like the exact kind of shit people were popular in high school for doing and saying.
Right. I think the things on Twitter, at least, they don't become popular because they're good ideas. They become popular because of the sentiment they express.
Yeah.
And so because of that, you never actually have any particular,
Yeah.
idea being
And
propagated.
I
It's
honestly,
just sentiment.
I'm very principled about the idea of the free marketplace of ideas. So I think that even though I'm sitting here saying that most people are stupid and that I dislike when trivial things get likes on Twitter as opposed to important things. The truth is that is humanity, and I just have to take it at face value because I'd rather have the free expression of ideas result in that than have some kind of censorship.
Right.
Like, I think the net outcome is better. But
I mean, I think I was
go
going to,
ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, I think that you need to have the free marketplace of ideas open to really everything. That way you can get everything out there and thoroughly discuss it. Not
Yeah.
just have a visceral gut reaction like something's bad, but to actually
Yeah.
discuss it. And for example, like racism, if you talk about that, you can pretty well disprove it. That's a
Uh,
hypothesis.
well, the thing is the free marketplace of ideas has to exist, and a part of the free marketplace of ideas is not censoring any viewpoints, regardless of what they are, other than, of
Right.
course, like direct threats or harassment or anything like that.
Right, but that's not even really an idea. That's just a visceral
Yeah,
reaction,
yeah, that's an action in a way. I mean, it's an illegal action. So,
Right.
but the free marketplace of ideas, like, here's the way I view it. I think I'm a libertarian left kind of person. So,
Yeah.
like, when it comes to economics, I'm a social democrat. Like, I look at, like, social democracies like Sweden, and I think that's the perfect mix of, well, at least the perfect to this point in time with the technology we have, perfect mix
Hmm.
of government and economy. And I think we should be like them, or we should, we should create more socialism in our country to be more like that. But I also think that uh, I believe in liberty. Like, I think that everyone should have the most maximized liberty possible. So I'm a libertarian, uh, social democrat, I guess would be the best description of my beliefs.
Right. So like you're libertarian on social issues, but you're more leftist on economic issues.
Yeah. Well, I just go by what works, and I honestly think that combination of shit is what works the best. And I think that when you're talking about like ideas or like political or social ideas, because what your goal when you're talking about those ideas is to make the world a better place. And I think when you want to make the world a better place, you have to examine the reality of it so you can move forward.
Right.
And in order to do that, you need to approach it the most scientific way you can. And a part of that process, the first part of that process, is brainstorming. So the free marketplace of ideas is the ultimate brainstorming session.
Right.
Now, I don't think, not the best ideas don't always win, and I'm not necessarily saying that, the best idea needs to be decided democratically, because I don't believe that. I just
Right.
think
I think
I just think the most substantive ideas should be chosen.
right because I think that's kind of where an element of constitutionalism has to enter. There have to be some things that are
Yeah.
unnegotiable as far as public opinion goes. Like for example, a freedom of speech.
Yeah, you can't have freedom of speech and then use that right to take away the right. Like, you can't have most people vote to take away their ability to vote.
Right.
That's just that's why you need certain rules that are very hard to change. Like, they require like maybe something like 90% of the population to change it or something.
Right. And also, well, I think that goes a far ways to protecting, the rights of minorities and such.
Oh yeah, because then the
Yeah.
majority is just going to always usurp the minority. And
Right. So there needs to be some sort of, a constitutional element in place to say this is where you cannot overstep. These are
yeah,
non-negotiable things.
and that's where I just that's where I disagree with many people on the. I mean, like the people on the left sometimes think that democracy is a totally infallible thing, but
Well, I think that democracy and the capacity we have it is an illusion anyway. So,
yeah, the kind we have is definitely an illusion. It's just a highly skilled ad, basically, or a highly well crafted ad. Is a better way to say it.
yeah. I
Um,
mean,
because honestly, our government and our media has been working together using the techniques of advertising to really uh, create a blanket of social control, which is
right.
totally unprecedented. Like nowhere else in human history has there been this level of social manipulation by special interests.
Well, yeah. I think, and it kind of goes back to this Madisonian philosophy. He said that the purpose of the government, or rather its primary purpose, was to protect the minority of the opulent against the majority.
Yeah,
So what that really means is you're protecting the interests of the wealthy class. Back then it was property rights. They didn't want to have people violate their property rights. But I think that, well, since then it's been expanded to include things like, something like smoking weed, cannabis. It's completely benign unless you're the one doing it. But for some reason it's illegal.
yeah. That's just really sad. And there's also an aspect to like that's like there's people who have been brainwashed and so they arbitrarily hate marijuana, and then there's people who are just special interests and they own like pharmaceutical companies that they'd rather people be taking their drugs than using other drugs, and
Right.
they lobby Congress to make the war on drugs to make everything illegal.
Right. I mean, I think that a lobbying system could be at least somewhat redeemed if labor was organized enough to lobby Congress, but
Yeah,
it's not.
it,
We don't even if it was, that doesn't necessarily
yeah.
mean the labor unions are democratic.
I mean, there should just be limitations on what contributions do. I mean, like
I
all
mean, yeah,
other developed countries have well regulated like lobbying rules.
yeah. I mean, personally, I think the best way to go about it is just campaign finance reform, do publicly funded elections, and have that be the end of it.
Yeah,
Instead of even trying to implement and justify and perfect a lobbying system where you have to have a shit ton of money coming forth from a single organization to get anything done.
yeah. I agree. I agree with that. So, do you have anything else you want to talk about, really?
Um, yeah, there was this girl. She was her name is Maida Hojabri. She was arrested in Iran for posting a video on Instagram where she was dancing and not wearing a hijab. The charges are
Oh
against
man.
her are spreading indecency.
So because she wasn't wearing the hat or whatever in Islam.
Yeah, so because she wasn't wearing the hijab, you could see her hair and everything.
I just think it's so funny how so many religions have fancy hats, and they think that because you're not wearing this piece of cloth, you're creating this crisis that they make laws against. And I find it funny. I don't, if you want to wear a hijab as a personal choice, by all means, I advocate for the most liberty that you can have in a society, and I think that there's nothing wrong with expressing yourself. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with being Muslim, but
Right.
I mean, I disagree. I disagree with people who believe in religions, but of course they have the right to do it. And my problem is when there's like a church and a state that are the same thing. So,
Like in Iran.
yeah, so I just and to be fair, there's a reason that their country kind of devolved into that, and I mean we literally overthrew their democratically elected leader.
Yeah, Mohammad Mossadegh was democratically elected, and we
Yeah,
overthrew him, replaced him with the Shah, who was basically an Islamist dictator. No, he wasn't an Islamist dictator. I made that up, but he was a dictator,
yeah.
and eventually his reign failed due to the Islamic
He was a
Revolution.
fascist. I believe he was a fascist dictator. And then,
Something along those lines.
yeah, and then what it did is, you see, it's funny because whenever you talk about things like this in history, everyone always wants there to be a good guy and a bad guy because we think in this like story narrative. But the
Of
reality
course.
is that the Shah, he's not really a bad guy or a good guy. He's just, well, he really is a bad guy in the context of the situation.
But he's not really a bad guy in and of
Yeah.
himself. He's a
But even,
useful idiot to the
yeah,
political establishment in the United States.
yeah, there's reasons why he's there. But what I'm trying to say is also the rebels that overthrew the Shah. I mean, they're the one that installed an oppressive theocratic government.
Hmm.
And, you know, you can say they were justified and revolting, and you can explain the reasoning. So obviously when you keep things underground, they're going to turn ugly and come back up.
Yeah,
So the Islamic revolt to the Shah is just what has established that theocracy in Iran. And honestly, there would have been a more natural progression of democracy had the United States not gotten involved in the first place,
yeah. I mean,
as opposed to those
obviously, it's
extremes happening.
yeah, but I mean, from our point of view, it's speculation just because it's a different timeline altogether. But
Yeah,
I mean, I just think that given the way that social change had been going in Iran for a long time,
yeah,
preceding Mohammad Mossadegh, if he had been allowed to continue in his presidency and they continued in that tradition of democracy, then I think that there could have been some pretty strong prospects there, especially because Mossadegh wanted to nationalize Iran's oil supplies and
yeah,
give the wealth to the Iranian people.
yeah. Of course, the capitalists are not going to allow
Never.
that. Nationalize the oil industry. Like, that almost makes it like it almost sounds like something that would help the people and not my profits. So, like, you can't do that.
Right.
But yeah, that woman should not have been arrested whatsoever. She should not have been charged. She should not have been prosecuted. There's absolutely no reason. It's just, aside from being unethical to arbitrarily restrict things, it just simply doesn't work. It does not work in the long run. If your society arbitrarily restricts things, there is going to be problems that emerge from that. And eventually it's going to destabilize that society. That's why fraud never works. That's why tyranny always falls. So, well, it always falls, at least until now, because I would say we've reached a point now where the level of social control is on dystopian proportions.
Right. I mean, I think that at least as far as the situation in Iran goes, all I can really hope for at this point is that there is a kind of, feminist movement sparked by
Oh
this. There
yeah.
is a kind of free speech movement sparked by it.
Oh, I
And
completely agree.
there is some popular
They
pushback against
really
that
need some
theocratic
feminism over
regime.
there. And I'm not joking about that. They really
Yeah.
need some feminism over there. They need some feminism in a lot of those countries because they just, it's 2018, and it just really saddens me to think that there are places where half the population is viewed as being a second class citizen still. That's just not good. It's totally unethical, and like I said, it just does not work. When you restrict rights unnecessarily, it just ends up not working. So like you need that. That's why diversity is so important.
Hmm.
Well, not even necessarily diversity, but that's why you need to guarantee rights for everyone. And it's a part of why diversity is important because you need many different ideas to progress the world. Otherwise, you're going to get tunnel vision and you can't move out of certain positions, like technologically. Like it's been shown. Like there's actually been studies that show that when you have an increased, a more diverse workforce, like in a tech company, the results are way more creative.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really paid much mind to the idea of diversity as a whole. I think
Yeah,
it's kind of arbitrary as long as individuals are represented.
Oh
But
yeah.
I certainly don't find anything wrong with it, especially in a country like the United States, where there's, of course, been a history of
Yeah.
systemic discrimination against certain groups. I think that it shouldn't necessarily be your message, but it should definitely be part of your platform, at least if you're anybody who values equality.
Yeah. And I speak just in terms of mainly like just on a scientific level, just having as many different ideas as possible and different perspectives it really aids in the process of making new ideas. But yeah, I feel really bad about that woman being arrested, and that's just there's news stories like that all the time from other countries. Yeah, even in this country, people get arrested sometimes for or they get uh, well, even if the law isn't working against people, the private sector is sometimes. So, like the NFL, for example, the NFL cracked down on their football players for protesting.
Right. And I mean, well, to a certain extent, you have to question how much is that even, the law versus the private sector.
Yeah,
Because you
legally they
should,
can do that.
right. Because I mean, obviously, it's
It's their
written in the
business.
law that the government can't censor free speech. But
Yeah,
there's absolutely no protection regarding a private organization's
yeah.
policies on free speech.
The most
And
I was just gonna say the most you can say about that is that the principle of freedom of speech was violated.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, even if you were concerned about ratings or ticket sales or whatever, whatever source of revenue that they were particularly worried about, it's just wrong to even attach the individual to the organization and then put
Yeah,
that on the organization.
yeah. I mean, honestly, the the ethical concern in restricting people's rights is obviously the most pressing thing, but it sucks that you even have to explain it on a pragmatic level to people. Like like you notice that I talked about how it doesn't work first before saying it was unethical because there's numbskulls on the internet who are going to hear this and they're if I would have said it's unethical first and they're going to be like, oh well, that SJW just thinks that his feelings matter more than what works and the facts and the logic. And it's funny because they say that and they're not going to listen to you after you say it's unethical. So you kind of have to be like, oh, it just doesn't work. You have to be factual and logical because otherwise they're not going to take you seriously because they have no morals. So
I mean, I think you should be a facts person
yeah,
or a facts first kind of person, regardless.
yeah, because honestly, and that's what ethics is. Ethics is based on what factually works. I think that's another big thing is like people are just confused on what morality really is these days, or well, they've always been confused, but they're still confused. So you have
I
so many
mean,
people who believe in just this dichotomy of right and wrong.
I'm skeptical as to how many people even possess morality because I understand it's popular sentiment, at least in some circles, that if you're like an atheist, for example, that you just don't have a system of morals.
Yeah,
Like their reaction is like, "Oh, you don't believe in God? Well,
what's
why
stopping
don't
you from
you?
doing that?
Yeah, yeah. Why? What's stopping you from raping and murdering?" And it kind of worries me.
Yeah,
I know what's stopping me from raping and murdering. It's empathy. You know, I raped and murdered all the people I want to rape and murder. Zero. I think Penderlet said that.
oh my
Um,
god.
but even outside of that, it's just like now my worry is like, what the fuck is going to happen if your illusion is shattered?
Yeah. Well, I think that if I had to guess, I would say that virtually all people have a built-in empathy that has helped us work together and survive. I mean, I think that's where empathy evolved from. I think it evolved from, uh, people realizing that working together was way more efficient than working apart, and so they developed a structure which was conducive to working together, which was empathy. And I think that like, see, you and I might know that, but everyone else, like these people on Twitter, for example, they just clearly don't know that. Like they clearly, for some reason, they just have never looked into what that is. Like either they're not curious or they were never taught it. But so many people have this mistaken, like this idea that morale of right and wrong is real, and it's a force that just exists in the universe, and we correspond to it, and there's no more debate past that. And that's just
Right.
such a primitive idea that was, the only reason anyone believes that is because they were raised in a certain in the society of that time.
Right, but I think that understanding morality as a product of certain Darwinian pressures can be difficult.
Yeah,
Just because you have to understand humans on a non-human level. You have to look
yeah,
at something that was proto-human.
and you also have to, I think people just have a difficult, like they have a really hard time uh, looking objectively at the world because they see it from this human perspective, like we all do. But they just don't want to put in the work to really imagine the world as it is, which it's just really just particles colliding. And I think, I mean, it's so important, like, for our society to just realize what's true, because we need to accept what's true if we're going to make the world a better place.
How do you
So,
mean?
well, you have to know, like, I mean, I would say building a society is a work of engineering. So you have to examine what works the best, and in order to do that, you would have to know what's true to begin with, and you'd have to work from there because you'd have to know how to manipulate that reality first, and in order to change it.
Right, but you also have to kind of ask yourself the question, what defines working the best?
Yeah, and
And then,
honestly, that's not even up to fact. That's more of an abstract thing we create. What works the best? It depends on what kind of society we want.
right.
And I think.
People,
Oh, sorry. You can continue.
yeah, I was just going to say people generally tend to agree the kind of society, I mean, at least in the West, where I grew up, we generally tend to agree, we should have as not necessarily as equal a society in regards to outcomes, but we should all have equal opportunity.
Yeah.
And we should all have certain inalienable rights.
And the thing is, everyone just disagrees on how to maximize opportunity. So the conservatives think maximizing opportunity means, totally disregarding government as a tool. But the reality is that if you look at like Sweden or Norway, those actually have the most opportunity. Like they have the most economic upward mobility. You can go to college for free. You have free healthcare, so you're not going to die on the side of the street. The next Einstein isn't going to arbitrarily die. Um, you know, working some shitty job. And they just can't. Their healthcare costs so much it's going to bankrupt them, so they die.
Right.
Because that's what at the end of the day, I mean, in my opinion, the system that works the best is the one that gives the most opportunity to every mind that exists. Because then every mind can influence the world and can build the world to be much greater. Because if you really think about it, I mean, if all of the human resources that we have on this planet right now, so there's 7 billion people, if they were all given the same exact opportunities to educate themselves and like just produce something truly new to the world, our planet would progress and like it'd be like a Star Trek future in like 10 years, pretty much. So, yeah, I mean, I think we can all generally agree that there's a direction of progress that history tends to go towards, and there's just certain ways to get there that are more conducive to human nature and reducing the amount of violence that occurs. So,
Right. Well, I mean, I think reducing violence is a goal of pretty much any society that's going to last more than one generation.
yeah. And, that's another thing, obviously just surviving and, reproducing and progressing,
Hmm.
expanding the civilization outwards.
But I mean, it's also kind of interesting to talk about just because, we're speaking in these broad terms of like a monolithic society with monolithic values, but we live in the United States where you have all different kinds of people
Yeah.
with all different kinds of value systems. So, I mean, it's really kind of hard to pin down exactly what would even go into educating everybody or
Hmm.
what you could possibly do to even establish any kind of society where there were universally understood truths.
Yeah, honestly, the most you can do is just give everyone the right to believe what they want, and then try to educate them the best you can, and make your compulsory education the best you can. And
Right.
I think in the near future we're going to develop the ability to send information directly into people's brains. So we could probably just beam everything that a human being needs to know into like the fetus. Like you could be born knowing quantum mechanics, and then at that point we would have improved humanity so much inherently that no one would be stupid. So everyone would accept universal truths. But then again, think about the dystopia. There's the flip side of that. What if they just beam the
Right.
wrong thing into their head, and everyone's born thinking God's real? So I mean, that's all you need to know. So I guess all we can do is increase the intelligence. I mean, maybe we could just raise the baseline cognitive ability, make the average IQ 200.
I kind of wish.
So, all right. Well, that was a pretty nice talk, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of.
As far as impromptu podcast episodes go, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
But yeah, what were we gonna? You said we were kind of what?
I said we kind of trailed off there at the end. We started talking about all these very
Yeah.
abstract concepts, but
Well, that's what I
whatever.
would expect. I mean, that's what I want. That's what I honestly want. I want there to be a lot of discussion on this podcast whenever we get to like actually making it
Right.
regularly.
Yeah,
'Cause-
more like a kind of full-time gig, I guess.
yeah, because before we made 2 episodes in late 2017, and then we didn't make them for a few months, and mostly due to just any reason you could expect, just poverty, mental health, just and you could pull any reason out of a hat, and it honestly was the reason, just because we live in this society, and shit is bad, and everyone has to go to work, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So,
We live in a society.
yeah. Yeah, that meme. When someone unironically they replied that to me when I was talking about the free marketplace of ideas to try to make it seem like I was the one that was dumb. I was like, all right, like get a load of this guy. I should have posted that picture, like the get a load of this guy. Or like
I know what
GIF,
you're talking about too. Yeah.
the GIF of like the Fortnite dance.
Yeah.
I literally am gonna send. Eventually, okay. There's gonna be a point where I get so frustrated with someone, I'm gonna send that and just mute them right after it. And that's gonna be my. I don't even know what to say about that. Twitter. Well, we already said all needs to be said about Twitter. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, that was a really nice talk. So, we'll definitely make more episodes. We'll make official episodes soon, I'm sure. Because that mic is pretty nice, honestly, that you're using.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Like that would work well. I mean, even before you ever Blue Yeti.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still living at home and my parents are asleep in the other room, so I'm kind of had to mumble all night. But
Yeah, it's cool. No, I can hear you perfectly though.
oh, that's good. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna stop recording. So, for everyone who sees this, make sure to give it a like, share it if you think it was interesting, and obviously subscribe if you want to see more. And for any platform, we're not just on YouTube, so we're on. Well, I would like to put it on SoundCloud, and I'd like to we have a Twitter as well, the High Council Twitter. It's at THC Podcast 17. So feel free to check that out. And have a good night, guys.